listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza and Matt Polachek, only on LA Talk Radio.
Well, welcome to another edition of Answers for the Family. I'm your co-host, Dr. Matt Polachek. And for those of you who have been listening, sending in questions and comments, thank you so much. And please continue to help spread the word that every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring you special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain, while bringing answers and options to making your lives happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, this show will address issues such as locating your runaway teen, family crisis intervention, building self-esteem, dealing with addiction, and so much more. We're going to introduce you to talented authors, caring people, and new innovations in the area of health, security, and fun for you and your family. With our experience working with families in crisis, we've been fortunate to meet and work with some of the top professionals in many of the helping fields who are all working to make this world a better place for us all. And those of you expecting to hear Alan's voice today, well, he's actually lost it. He's dealing with a minor voice issue. I basically think he ran himself down running across the country. He was working on another one of his runaway cases, and he was in Chicago and New Orleans. He just keeps stamping that passport all over the place. And it does remind us of the difficult work that he does for his investigative work and for West Shield. And for the listeners that don't know what Alan does, he spends his days rescuing adolescents who get caught up in human trafficking rings, adolescents who run away, adolescents with serious mental health problems. And his company, West Shield Transport, is a great company that takes adolescents and gets them to treatment programs across the country. You know, kids with addiction issues, mental health issues. So, Alan, if you're out there listening, I hope you get your voice back, and we'll see you back in the studio next week. Today, we're very lucky because we have an actual in-studio guest, and I'm excited to introduce Paul Aubin. At 5 years of age, Paul was informed by his parents that he was an adopted child. He couldn't believe what his parents were telling him. They were not his real birth parents. The Aubins adopted Paul from a home for unwed mothers in New England when they found out that they couldn't have their own children. Paul went on to lead a relatively normal life in the 60s and 70s, growing up on Long Island, New York. He didn't give much thought to the circumstances surrounding his adoption until a health scare later in his life motivated him to go and search for his birth parents. A journey that would be filled with twists and turns, leading to a major cover-up to protect the identity of Paul's birth parents involved in a scandal within the Catholic Church. In his autobiography, Secrets of the Father, Paul speaks to the missing pieces of the identity puzzle that many adoptees across our country experience. Their sense of abandonment, rejection by their birth parents, and trying to answer the question, who am I? And the mystery of not knowing any links to your past or family of origin. This has long life implications, obviously, and Paul's personal journey is absolutely amazing with an outcome that you are not going to believe. And to be here in studio, I'm so excited to have you, Paul. Welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it, and appreciate this opportunity to share my story. I hope it has an impact on people out there.
And you've got the book and other things, but let's just start with what inspired you to suddenly search for your birth parents at 33 years of age.
Yeah, well, I was blessed to have some really loving adopted parents, and so I didn't give a whole lot of thought to my birth parents and my history there. Although I will say there are some missing pieces to the puzzle that you often wonder about as an adoptee or even a foster child. But where it really came to a head was when I was 33 years old. I was in the pharmaceutical industry here in Los Angeles, and I found out that I had high cholesterol. I went to a medical convention at the LA Convention Center with my colleagues from the pharmaceutical industry, and they were doing testing on cholesterol, and mine was off the charts. It was 307, and this was just at the beginning stages of cholesterol coming out, early 90s, and there wasn't a whole lot of research on it, but I knew that 307 was way too high, and I was pretty fit at the time, and so I was alarmed that it was that high. So I went to see one of the cardiologists that I was calling on in Burbank, and he went through the test with me and said that I had something that it wasn't diet related. It was really more in my genes, and he really encouraged me to find my birth parents. So that was really the kind of the motivation that I needed. from my physician to find my birth parents at that time.
And it wasn't a time, where we had Google and internet and all these things. So how would you even start the search like that?
Yeah, that was the big question for me back then, because it was early 90s. You couldn't just put in Google, who are my parents, right?
Right.
So
can you do that now?
You might get better results faster, but certainly not back then, that's for sure. So a real interesting thing that actually sparked my faith back then. Back then I was raised in a Catholic church in Long Island, New York, and that just was not working for me from a connection standpoint. And I actually ended up leaving the church when I went away to school to Ohio State. And for 20 years, I was all focused on myself, on my career. And then you fast forward, to the age of 33, and I was told by my doctor not to, to go ahead and find my birth parents. And so 3 weeks went by, and I was looking and searching and trying to figure out how to do this. And I went to a meeting at the Overland Park Marriott. I was working for a pharmaceutical company back then out of Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And they interviewed me, and I just happened to be walking past the marquee that lists all of the meetings in the hotel that day, in the lobby. And at the very top, it said International Adoptee Search Foundation.
Wow! You talk about faith and coincidences and stuff.
Yeah, crazy. So I just couldn't believe that. And it seemed to be like an answer to all of my issues at the time. So I went running down to this ballroom to meet the people. And there was a conference there with a lot of other adoptees like myself listening to guest speakers, and ran into women at the registration desk. And I told them my dilemma, that I had this, it was actually called familial hyperlipidemia, where your liver just kicks out way too much cholesterol. And it's kind of a rare thing. And she said, well, you know what, we have somebody in New England, where you're from, where you were born, who does searches. Wow. Her name is Nancy. And I said, are you kidding me? And so everything was kind of falling together with my search.
Yeah.
And I left that hotel just on cloud nine thinking, wow, I just might have a chance here to find my birth parents. So that was the beginning of my journey, and I was pumped up right then and there to... at the time, it was, I just want to find for my medical reasons, but then as you get into it, you realize that you want to uncover all of those questions that you had growing up as an adoptee, of not knowing who your birth parents are, why they gave you up for adoption, do you have brothers and sisters, what's my nationality, do they want to see me, and just a lot of questions that adoptees have.
And I know the book gets into a lot of that.
Yes.
And I definitely want to spend a lot of time today on what that part was like for you. Mm-hmm. But first, you find this woman, serendipitously, or however you want to look at it. Yeah. Well, does it take years to find your parents at that point, or how long? What happens?
Yeah, good question. So from there, I instantly called Nancy. And she lived in New England, like I said, and she was delighted to hear from me. And she apparently is an adopted child herself. She has adopted children. Her husband passed away at an early age and left her some funds to go ahead and fuel her passion, wow, which was to help people like me find their birth parents. And so she said, well, Paul, I've done over 2,000 searches, and it'll probably take me anywhere from 30 to 60 days, 90 days tops, okay, to find your...
So you're excited.
Yeah, like, okay, that's reasonable. I've been waiting 33 years, right?
Yeah, what's 30 more days?
Well, 90 days goes by, and she has no luck. She's getting nowhere, and she calls me, and she says, Paul, out of the 2,000 searches I've done, this has been the most difficult. Every stone I turn, there's problems. There seems to be... empty files, people aren't talking, people aren't comfortable talking about this. There's something else going on.
At work here.
Not at work here, yeah. And people just aren't being cooperative like they have been in the past with me. So they're hiding something. And so that's where she kind of alluded to the fact that there is a cover-up here as to who my birth parents really are.
The story thickens.
The story thickens, yes, yeah. So from there, several months went by, and she finally called me, and she said, Paul, I spoke to somebody in the State Department in Massachusetts. they looked up your date that you were given up for adoption, and they have uncovered your birth name. And that was kind of a alarming thing for me to find out that I actually had a birth name different than Paul Aubin.
Yeah, what was that feeling like?
So that was really strange. It just felt like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
It was kind of good news, bad news, So my name was Michael Patrick Johnson at the time, when I was first born. So she pursued my mother first, and then my father later on. But she gave me a call and said, why don't you go ahead and call your birth mom? I found her, and she's living in Worcester, Massachusetts, and why don't you call her? And here's what you need to do. You need to understand the fact that she's going to be alarmed, obviously, and this is what I'd recommend you do. So what I ended up doing was calling her and prepared for quite a long time.
Did you prepare for a positive and negative kind of reaction, or?
At the time, that's a really good question. I just prepared for the positive because for years I envisioned my mother as being this wonderful person who wanted to hear from me.
Yeah.
Right? But the expectations of us adoptees going back to find our birth parents, this has been one of my learnings, is that they don't necessarily want to uncover all of that from the past in several cases. So when I gave her a call, I said, hi, this is Paul Aubin. You don't know me, but I'm calling long distance from California, and I'm doing some research on my family tree, and I think we may be related. And so there was a long pause, as you might
This
imagine.
wasn't a telemarketer calling her.
No, this wasn't right, no. In fact, I called the first time, and a young woman answered the phone who I just assumed was my half-sister.
I mean, I can't imagine going through your head when you're on this phone call.
Yeah, it's just so I actually ended up hanging up because I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I called back a couple of days later, and after I asked her that question, she said, well, no, I don't know. She was really fumbling and mumbling around the whole conversation. She was caught her off guard. I said, well, is your maiden name Johnson? And she said, no, there's a couple of other ladies around the neighborhood, but no, that's not my name. I said, well, I'm sorry, I must have the wrong person. And I was really disappointed. But my private investigator, Nancy, said they will probably deny it immediately.
So she literally did deny?
She denied everything.
Oh.
Yeah, so the air was kind of out of my balloon, and I was ready to hang up, and she said, well, wait a minute. Help me understand why you're searching. And I told her, and I said, it's for medical reasons, and my doctor wants me to find out so he knows how to treat me. And then she went on to say, well, where were you raised? And I said, Long Island. And she goes, where do you live now? I said, California. She goes, do you have any children? And so anyway, for 45 minutes, she went on.
Like a background check almost.
Background check, yeah. But it was much more sincere and genuine. Like she really genuinely wanted to know about my background. So that right then and there told me that she probably was my mother. But she didn't want to admit it for some reason. And so she said, you know what? You seem like a good, nice young man, and you're doing this for a good reason. I'd be willing to cooperate. There's two other Margaret Johnsons living in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I'm often getting their mail and phone calls. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because 45 minutes ago she said her name wasn't Johnson. Right?
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, a little smoke and mirrors. So, again, Nancy told me that this might happen, and I didn't want to say, hi, Mom, and just startle her. So she said, if you come to Worcester, I'd be more than happy to speak to the other two Margaret Johnsons and try to uncover something for you.
Wow.
So I got off the phone elated, because in fact I told her before I got the phone I was coming to Massachusetts the following week on business, which was a little white lie, but
right.
Well,
you had her pinned down at that point,
right?
Yeah.
I was going to come up with some kind of a business reason to be there, right?
This is unbelievable.
It was crazy. So I get there, and she had this home on top of this hill, little blue collar house in Little Hill, and it was so exciting for me to actually see where my birth mother lived. And
So you were sure it was your birth mom?
I felt pretty sure, just based on
Okay.
the questions and the fact that she didn't completely tell the truth about her last name. And then later on, she said, "Yeah, my name is Johnson." And so I gave her a call when I got there. I said, "Hi, I'm here. When do you want to meet?" And she said, "Paul, I've been giving this some more thought, and you have no idea what you're getting into. There's a lot of sensitivities around your story, and there's a lot of people that can be hurt by you uncovering the truth."
The plot thickens.
Yes. So I'm thinking, what the heck, right? What is going on here? And I was really disappointed because I flew 3,000 miles. So I said, well, I need to respect that. I'm sensitive to that, and you've got my phone number, and if you have a change in mind, let me know. But you just need to know I'm doing this all for the right reasons, and I'm not looking to uncover anything here except for my health issues.
Were you crushed at that point?
I was crushed. I really was. But I'm a young man at the time, young man of persistence, and so I wasn't going to give up. I actually drove to the bottom of the hill where her house was the next morning, and I just wanted to see my mother drive by in the car and get a good look at her because I never saw her, right? So I waited, and I thought I saw her pull out of her driveway and take off, and as it turned out, that wasn't her. I followed her all the way through to this schoolhouse, and I knew she didn't work there. She actually still works at a church. So I was following the wrong car, right?
For those out there, you got to get this book, obviously.
Yeah. So then I'm in Worcester, Massachusetts at 8:30 in the morning, and well, now what do I do? Well, as it turned out, my adopted parents, way back in the day, found out they couldn't have children. They went to their best friend, this woman, Chris, who lived in Worcester, and said, "Chris, would you mind speaking to your brother?" Her brother made these rounds through these homes for unwed mothers, and he was kind of a volunteer doing that. And I said, "You know what, Chris, could you tell your brother that I'm in town because perhaps he can help? He was there from the very beginning."
You are persistent.
Right? So I had this energy about me to really find the truth, but to do it in a respectful way so that I wasn't hurting people. Uncovering things and hurting people. I was trying not to be selfish about it, but I needed those answers. So she said, "Yeah, Ted would love to hear from you, and you haven't seen him in quite a while, and why don't you give him a call?" So I called him, and he was so excited to hear from me. He said, Paul, good to hear from you. What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm in town. Do you want to have some lunch?" And so we met, and we had lunch, and the night before that, I met Nancy at her house, and she suspected that Ted was my dad, that he was the reason for the cover-up. Well, as it turns out, the reason why Ted would cover this up is because he's a Catholic priest. The plot thickens.
The plot thickens.
And he was an old family friend.
So you had actually met him that day and had no clue.
And had no clue. But Nancy put a bug in my ear that it might be. So here's Nancy, her persistence the night before. She said, "Paul, I'm going to drive to the rectory and see if he looks like you. I'm going to just ask for directions and see if he can help." Well, she came back, and she was absolutely stunned. She said, "I think it might be him."
Wow.
And I was floored because he was a family friend. He baptized me as a baby, and he served me communion at church all these years.
Wow.
And
did you remember him as a child?
I did.
Okay.
I did, yeah, because whenever I went to see my Aunt Chris, I typically saw the rest of the family, which turned out to be my birth family.
Right, but I mean, obviously,
at
the time, the Catholic Church would never. I mean, this is a true cover-up.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the funny part of the story. I go out to lunch with him, and I'm looking at all of his features, all of his mannerisms, every tone of voice, and it does look like I'm looking. You ever see that commercial where the gentleman is sitting on the airplane and he himself 20 years later sits next to him? That's what it was like. It was like sitting next to me. In fact, the age that I am now, is the age that he was when I met him.
Oh, because I was going to say, what are you going to look like in 20 years?
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, so I'll look great on radio. Yeah. So we go out for lunch, and he takes me to this restaurant way out on the edge of town, and then we get to the hostess stand, and he says, "Can you find us a table in the corner? We want some privacy." And my impression of that was I looked so much like him, and here he is, a priest. He wanted to make sure that the parishioners didn't
see him,
right? With me. That was my impression anyway.
But he still wanted to, he was still willing. I mean,
yeah, he was very excited to meet with me. And he orders salmon with no butter, whole wheat bread.
I think I know where this is going.
Yes, brown rice. Okay, and I looked at him and I said, Father Ted, this is an amazing diet. What's going on? And he said, well, I've got this issue with cholesterol. So I was floored, right? And I said, I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. I do research on this, and I'm just curious, where are you at? He said, without medication, I'm at 307. And he goes, Paul, I know that's high, but it's well controlled on a medication called Mevacor. And I'm at 170, 180 right now, which is good.
Right.
So I said, so it's controlled on medication. You didn't have a heart attack or anything. And he goes, no, I'm good.
So this trip is serving two purposes for you.
Yes. And so now meeting him there's more confirmation because of the way he looks and the mannerisms. And now he's got cholesterol exactly the same number as mine. I'm beginning to believe that Nancy's theory is correct. And I'm kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
Right? Just a little bit. So he said, Paul, what are you doing in town? I said, well, I'm here on business, but I'm also doing some research on my family tree. And he goes, oh, why? And I said, well, I just happen to have high cholesterol just like yours, and my doctor encouraged me to find my birth parents. And he was really uncomfortable, long pause, and so I wasn't going to try to push him any further than that.
Right.
And so in the end, after that conversation, I said, whatever you can do to help me, you were there from the very beginning. I think I might have found my mother, and I thought maybe you could confirm that because you were there. You brought me from the home for unwed mothers back then in the 50s.
Right.
From her. Can you confirm that it was her, Margaret Johnson? And he said, well, Paul, I've got my vows, and I can't reveal that, but I think you're on the right track.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This story, it's so incredible. It's so exciting. I really want to find out whether she ever admitted it, he ever admitted it, but unfortunately, we're going to have to wait because we're going to take a quick break and come right back with Paul Aubin.
Founded over 25 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield specializes in resolving adolescent issues that negatively impact the family. From preteen to young adult, we are experienced and qualified to help. We offer solutions which include referrals to a network of top professionals internationally that we work very closely with in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, and psychiatry. Our in-home crisis intervention care program helps to stabilize families and bring effective resolution. We are supported by our licensed investigation company that enables us to offer legal and expert services for locating runaway teens and more. Our therapeutic transportation services help to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely provided transportation to specialized schools and programs with unmatched experience and success. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services is the best solution when your family is facing personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585 and let us help you.
Well, welcome back to Answers with the Family. I told you we got a good one today with Paul Aubin. Paul, I think the listeners and myself, we want to know, you sit at this table, you get an inkling from your potential father, your potential mother. Tell us what happens.
Okay. So from there, and again, during this whole discussion with him, I really am trying to be sensitive to the fact that I benefited from being well prepared for this discussion. and he's just getting hit across the head with a 2x4 if, in fact, he is my birth father. So I'm really trying to be sensitive to that, and I think that's important for any adoptee that looks for their birth parents, is to be sensitive to their issues with us. So we're having a nice lunch. We both ordered salmon with no butter and whole wheat bread and all that good stuff. Pretty boring meal, but good for our cholesterol and our health. And he pretty much confirmed to me that he was my dad just from the reaction that he had to why I was in town, and then also confirming my birth mother in such a way with his nonverbal cues. But so I was getting a lot of the missing pieces of the puzzle answered, but not confirmed verbally. So I wanted to be respectful to him. I said, Ted, it was great meeting with you. I'm heading back to Worcester, and then I'm taking a ferry across to Long Island to see my parents, my adopted parents. He goes, well, be sure to tell him I said hello, because he grew up actually with my adopted parents.
Wow.
He went to elementary school, junior high, high school with them. So there he was very good friends with them. So then I'm driving back to Worcester. He was in Springfield.
When you're driving back, are you elated? Are you like, what's going on?
Oh, yeah. The emotions are flying.
Yeah.
And I'm not a real emotional guy, but I was in tears for a lot of reasons. To find out at the age of 33, 34 who your birth parents are, and to actually meet your birth parent for the first time and have a dialogue with them is a feeling that is just elation.
Yeah.
But then there were more questions, right, with that. So I pull into the Worcester Marriott after meeting with him, and there's a blinking light on my telephone. Remember back then, there's no cell phones, keep in mind. And there's a blinking light on the hotel phone, and there's a message, and it's from him. And he says, Paul, I'm not sure if you have the flexibility to spend more time here, but I would love to spend more time with you. Perhaps tomorrow you can come back to Springfield.
What a call.
All right? I was like, wow. I was like, okay, so he's thought about it. As a priest, he's prayed about it, and he wants to reveal the truth. So I was excited. I was more than happy to extend my trip. And I drove back to Springfield the next day, and we met, and we took I'll never forget this drive. We took a drive through I believe it's called the Mohawk Trail through New England, and just a gorgeous trail over wooden bridges and autumn leaves, and just a beautiful drive through western Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont. And we just spent the day together, and I was hoping that he would reveal who he was, but he didn't want to do that still. He just wanted to spend time with me, and that was so evident. And every ounce of my being wanted to pursue it more, but something or someone told me, no, Paul, don't rush it. When he's ready, he'll share with you. But for me, it was an unforgettable experience to spend a full day with my birth dad, and what I realized was that we had so much in common. I had the linkage there with him, the natural link with him that I didn't have with my adopted dad, unfortunately. And we had just a glorious day together. So, but the frustrating part was I left there and still didn't really know.
You wanted that confirmation.
Yeah, I did. And Nancy shared with me, Paul, just don't rush it. The good news is you're moving the ball closer to the goal line, and he's spending time with you. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy the moments. So I went back to California after that trip, and I was elated. I really felt like I knew who my parents were, but it wasn't really confirmed. And I wrote a letter to my Aunt Chris, and I just said to her, Aunt Chris, I suspect your brother of being my birth dad, and just wondering if you know anything about this. And I just assumed that he would have told her, and apparently he didn't. So
there's still this cover-up going.
There's this cover-up going. Yeah, so she didn't know anything. And I kind of let the worms out of the can here. I don't know. But she ended up getting really upset about it and drove over to see her brother and said, Ted, you owe it to Paul and his family to be honest with him. And so 6 months went by. And I was on pins and needles the whole time. And my Aunt Chris was really my champion to uncover the truth.
Yeah.
And so he called me on voicemail. I was about to give a presentation at a hotel in San Diego, and remember the days of the phone banks where you don't have cell phones, so you
Right.
go to the phone bank and you get your voicemail messages or your pager goes off, right? Back in dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it was him on the voicemail. And he said, "Hi, Paul, this is Father Ted. I received the letter that you sent your Aunt Chris. It was a very nice letter. I understand where you're coming from. And you need to know that all of your suspicions about me being your birth dad are correct.
Oh.
And I know this isn't the best way to tell you, but I felt like you needed to know. Why don't you fly to Boston? We'll spend more time together, and I'll share everything with you that you deserve to know. But you need to promise me that you keep this between us, because if this gets out, it'll be on the front page of the Boston Globe.
Right.
It'll be everywhere."
But I mean, that made no difference to you, right?
No, I didn't
Yeah.
care. No, so I kept it to myself. Although my boss and just a couple of very close friends knew about this, and they were kind of cheering me on. And that's another thing. If you go through your search, you really ideally want to have people in your corner supporting you, because it is such an emotional journey that it's hard to do on your own. So I went back there, and he shared everything with me, and said that he fell in love with a woman in the church, and wasn't intending to do that. Exercised poor judgment, and before he knew it, she was coming to him saying she was pregnant with me back in 1958. So he spoke to a priest friend of his, who was much more seasoned and senior than him, as to what to do, and you can imagine what he felt, at that point. So he encouraged him to go to the bishop, and the bishop was really disappointed with the news and said, "Well, you'll need to serve out a penance for this." And he was so disappointed because apparently my father had a lot of charisma in the church. He had a following. People loved him.
So this is a huge risk for him.
It's huge.
But he was willing to do it for you.
He was willing to do it. So he ended up actually serving out his penance in Vietnam on the front lines as a chaplain.
Wow.
And became a war hero. And then he became the head chaplain at Arlington National Cemetery. So he came out of this serving his penance, doing his time, and coming out of it pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my mother was shunned by the church as a scarlet woman, as the church, with all due respect for everybody out there in the church whore, unfortunately, and lived a life of bitterness and resentment and abandonment, rejection, and still to this day, the stories kind of surround her.
Wow.
So that one event in her life, not only losing a son, but losing her identity and friends and family, it kind of ruined her for life. So her part of the story is very, very sad.
And did she admit that she was your mom at one point? Or?
Well, then so I'll switch over to my mother's story. So I after she told me that she didn't want anything to do with this, and I did confirm who my dad was.
And it makes sense she didn't, based on what happened.
Right, based on all of that,
Yeah.
I could see now why she wouldn't want to share it. Well, 3 years go by, and I'm working for a pharmaceutical company, and they sent me up to Harvard Business School outside of Boston in Cambridge to take some postgraduate classes. And I'm there at a cafe, probably having more than one glass of wine.
And salmon with no butter.
Right. But I'm getting up the courage to call her.
Okay.
Because I'm not in that part of the country very often. And so I gave her a call, and I said, "Hi." Her name is actually short for, it's Peggy. I said, "Peggy, I just want you to know I'm here in town. I'm never here, and I would love to give you an opportunity to see your son."
He just took a swing.
Just took a swing.
Love it.
Yeah, it was admittedly not the smartest thing to do, but I felt like at the time it was the right thing to do, and in the end it was.
Your persistence is not I will never underestimate you, Paul.
Well, thank you.
Don't ever come for me, please.
I'm hunting you down. So I said, I'm here in town. I would love to see you. If you don't want to see me while I'm here, you'll never hear from me again. But I thought I'd give you an opportunity to meet your only son, your firstborn, while I'm in town. And respectfully, I won't share this with anybody, but I thought you might want to meet me. She said, you know what? Let's go ahead and do that.
Wow.
And I was shocked, And so she said, I'll meet you at I spent a lot of time at Marriott, so I'll meet you at the Worcester Marriott for lunch. So I was elated. I hung up the phone. I was celebrating. I can't believe this. I'm going to meet my mother. And this was a very emotional time. So I drive there the following morning, and I'm really, in my mind, adoptees out there can relate to this. In my mind, I pictured her as kind of a older, frumpy, blue-class woman, housekeeper.
Yeah.
Well, I get there and park in the parking garage, and I see this woman walking behind me by herself, behind my car. Tall, blonde, business suit, really professional looking. And I said, no, that can't be her. So I'm waiting. Nobody else is coming. Right? So I said, okay, let me get out. Maybe she came in a different entrance. So I went into the lobby, and she's sitting there by herself. And I lost it. I had to go to the restroom and gather everything together, get myself together, and threw water in my face, and it really overwhelmed me. So then I came out to the lobby, and I approached her, and she said, Paul? And I said, yeah. She goes, is this Peggy? And she goes, yeah. And she gave me this big hug, and we embraced. And I looked over her shoulder, and all of the front desk clerks in the hotel were crying. Because apparently she shared with them the story. And they were very emotional, and it was just an emotional time I'll never forget. And so we sat down in the coffee shop for like 3 hours, and she shared with me what happened, and she had a lot of bitterness and resentment towards my birth dad because she felt like it was all right. He pursued her, and she was younger, and he's off this war hero, and everything's fine for him.
And she's scorned.
And she's scorned, and the whole community looks at her with, with not a good perception. So that's the only time I saw her. And we had phone conversations for a couple of years after, but at one point, after the last conversation I had with her, she said, Paul, I just can't do this anymore. And you don't understand. I've been going through therapy on this. I'm seeing psychiatrists about this my entire life, and here you are popping in. It's just not doing me any good. So that hurt.
Yeah. We've got listeners out there that are probably going through a million emotions right now. Yeah. And I'm thinking at this, there's love, there's rejection, there's I've never seen such a mix of emotion.
Yeah, there was. So it was up and down and everything else, but I had to set the bar to a place of an expectation that was low. And if I was able to get anything, if I was able to get the missing pieces of the puzzle of my identity filled in and my health issues filled in, then it was a win. But there were big pieces of me that said, you know what, I would love to meet my half brothers and sisters. I'd love to have a relationship.
Keep going with it, yeah.
With all that. So unfortunately that didn't happen. I did have a 7-year relationship with my dad secretly over the phone, and when I came to Massachusetts, he would meet with me, and that was a really special time.
Yeah.
And he actually was the one that brought me back to my faith and encouraged me to pursue my faith, and said that my journey was certainly not on my own, that he felt that God's hand was in it, and that a lot of good would come out of this. So from there I became a Christian, and fast forward a number of years, and I ended up becoming a men's pastor at Saddleback Church and then Mariners Church.
You followed your dad's footsteps.
I followed his footsteps. In a lot of ways. So he really inspired me. to include faith in my daily walk, and it's been life-changing.
So, I mean, this journey, do you think it changed you as a person, or how do you think this entire, journey really affected who Paul is?
Yeah, it changed me dramatically. I was the poster child for the selfish, career-minded person who just wanted to. Well, let me go back a couple of steps. What I've learned through all of this is that when you experience abandonment and rejection, that in many cases you are looking for acceptance, affirmation, and validation that you aren't getting from your parents. Mm-hmm. And so I was rejected by my birth parents, and then my relationship with my adopted dad really wasn't all that great, and it was pretty clear to me that it wasn't his idea to adopt me. It was my adopted mother's idea, and she's wonderful. But my adopted dad never gave me the time of day, never gave me acceptance, validation. So what I ended up doing was taking the path of pursuing this acceptance and validation in other parts of my life. I did it through sports. I did it through getting the next big title at work, and didn't realize until much later in my life, after this journey, that there was really a void there that I was trying to fill almost every day of my life. And so when I then became a man of faith, I realized that I really didn't have to pursue that anymore, that God loved me, and he was my father, and I didn't have to work so hard to validate and find acceptance, So that was life-changing for me. It really was.
And when we were talking before the show, you had mentioned something, the kind of who am I?
Yes.
That essence of, that who am I as a human being, as a person. You felt like because this experience happened, you were able to kind of answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked earlier about this, and I've talked to a lot of adopted people about this and children. There are those missing pieces of the puzzle. You don't feel linked, and you ask the question, who am I? I felt like from the movie with Tom Hanks, Castaway, I felt like I was on an island where nobody really looked like me, I just wasn't a part of a genealogy or a family. I didn't even know my background. I didn't know if I was Irish or Catholic or my denomination. I didn't know anything. So that's an important awareness, I think, for people out there that aren't adopted, is that most adopted children out there, at least in the people that I've talked to, they're seeking that. They're seeking some kind of acceptance and linkage. And so that's something that I wanted to bring awareness to, is we all seem to need some kind of a link as to what are we linked to, what family background do we have, and answering the question, who am I?
And those, other adoptees out there listening, and people who work with adoptees, what the story, the book Secrets of the Father, a true story of a young man's search for his birth parents that lead to a discover of a scandalous cover-up. But for those of the listeners out there, what do you really want your story to impact, or how do you really want it to impact them?
I really like to give them, just let them know that they're not alone if they are feeling the same feelings that I had, of being alone and not having that linkage to your birth family, that to maybe pursue a search, to maybe pursue your faith, and just get the answers to those missing pieces to your puzzle, because you'll feel more complete. Remember the movie with Tom Cruise where she said, "You complete me." This journey did complete me, and I can't begin to tell you what a difference that makes when you do know who you are. You can't answer that question, who am I? So that's one thing. The other is, if you do go on a search, that you're sensitive to the people that are involved in that search, and that you set your expectations at a place where you may be disappointed. Because when I was growing up, you'll read in the book, if you read it, that I thought that my parents could possibly be kings and queens, that they could be wealthy people living on the hill, and I can't wait to find them, But in many cases, your birth parents don't necessarily want to see you, and they've got their own lives. And so you have to set that expectation that you may be disappointed. But I can tell you, if you just get one inkling of information that helps you define your identity, it's worth it. It's worth the search. Even if you find out your dad is in jail and your mother, with all due respect, if they were prostitutes or whatever, at least you know.
You can answer the who am I
questions,
yeah.
right? And that you are different. Now, you don't have to follow the same legacy perhaps that your birth parents had, that you can change that legacy, that linkage. So the expectation piece as well is something I want to get out there. Yeah.
You know, we've got listener questions, and I apologize that I wasn't able to get to all the listener questions, people calling in and writing in today. But I do want to mention a comment that just came in here from Anna Marie in Florida. She wrote, "My father was adopted, and his parents refused to ever tell him who his real parents were. It was not until they both had passed that our great aunt told me in confidence that he was the illegitimate son of one of my uncles who passed from cancer when my dad was less than a year old. I did tell my dad, but he said it was too late in life to care. I could tell he holds hurt and bad feelings in his heart about it. I just wanted to share that this is a theme that truly stuck my heart, and I look forward to reading your book." And that's from Anna Marie.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Oh, that right there is just worth the 2.5 hours in traffic this morning.
Well, I mean,
yes.
Paul, you came up. It took you 3 hours, but your story it's amazing. It obviously brings everyone to tears listening that read the book. The book, Secrets of the Father, a true story of a young man's search for his birth parents that lead to a discover of a scandalous cover-up. Everyone out there, grab the book. But before you go, Paul, I have to ask you one question.
Okay.
And one of Al and I's favorite things is to hear our favorite stories of life experiences. Have you heard a story similar to yours since you've written the book?
It's ironic you should ask that question, Matt, because just last week I met a gentleman who's the same age as I am right now. He's 58, and we met through a work environment piece. In fact, I'm going to see him in about an hour here. We're meeting again. But he called me, was it last Saturday, and he said, "Paul, can you be available to give an interview to somebody on Monday afternoon?" He's an executive recruiter here in the area. And I said, "Yeah, sure, I can do that, but I'm on a radio show that day." He goes, "Oh, what is it about?" And I told him. And he said, "You've got to be kidding me, I'm adopted." And I said, "Oh." He goes, "And I went on a search for my birth parents." And I said, "You're kidding me." And so I said, "Well, you need to read my book. It'll really touch you, I think." So he downloaded my book on Kindle, and he said he was going to read just one chapter on Sunday. He calls me Sunday night and says, "Paul, my day turned out very different. I ended up reading your book from cover to cover, and it's really impacted me. And I want to sit down with you for a couple of hours and just talk through some of these things." So he shared some of the same things that I went through, that there was a missing link, that he's struggled with his identity, but it's all good. He's also a man of faith, as I am.
Wow.
And that's really helped him quite a bit. So that's just a recent story that hit close to home. That I thought was awesome.
And those interested in their book, Amazon, where else are we looking?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's also Barnes & Noble. And locally here, it's in some of the church bookstores in Orange County and Los Angeles. But that's probably the best way to get it, just off of Amazon or Barnes & Noble, yeah.
Paul Aubin, great story, great guest, incredible day. I'm so thankful for you being on the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. And I hope some of the listeners out there were impacted and inspired. I
would imagine. And listeners, please be sure to put us on your calendar and tune in next week when our guest Bob Imai will discuss Ryu Okawa's new book, Think Big, Be Positive, Be Brave to Achieve Your Dreams. And if you missed or you want to share our show with your friends, please visit our archives of past interviews at answersforthefamily.com. You may also subscribe or resubmit your name to download your free copy of the Attitude of Gratitude Journal, your 21-day guide to achieving the quality of thankfulness through self-discovery. And the next time you are on Facebook and Twitter, please remember to stop by our page and check out some of our latest posts. And if you like them, please like us and spread the word. I hope Alan gets his voice back, feels better. We'll be in studio next week. And thank you all for listening to Answers for the Family.
You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza and Matt Polachek, only on LA Talk Radio.